Hi, and welcome to another episode of Garmology, a podcast about clothes and stuff. Now, if you think that the pod has been a bit of a negative Nelly of times, talking about the environment and sustainability and clothes are awful and all this, well, I've got good news for you because today we're off to Scotland and the clothes are really, really happy. So, without further ado, welcome to the pod, Laurence. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Nick. Hi everyone. I'm Laurence. I am the founder and owner of Woolkind, a creative, customizable, colourful knitwear brand based in Edinburgh in Scotland. Um, I've been running for about 3 years now as a business. Came from a completely different background, and everything I do is about trying to create beautiful, well-made, sustainable clothing that you buy and lasts forever.
Now, clearly, you know of my fascination with people's backgrounds and how they got to where they are when you dangled a little tidbit there that you come from a completely different background. So I'd like to look back in time to where, well, I mean, as far back as you like, really, and talk about how you got to where you are as now a knitwear entrepreneur.
So I started my career about 20 years ago. I did maths at university. Um, I've always loved maths and patterns, and I accidentally ended up moving into a sort of accounting and finance role. But in the background, I was always knitting. I've always just obsessed with knitting. So I was taught as a young boy in sort of 6, 7 by my adopted Scottish grandmother, and it's always been something that was a hobby that kind of sat in the background. And when I worked for, like I say, I started in accounting and I worked in that role for about 2 or 3 years. I moved very quickly into an IT function. It was just at the time that the financial crisis hit in 2006, 7, and I was lucky that my that I was able to kind of get opportunities because of that, because I just come out of university. So I moved into sort of IT roles because I was very good at understanding systems and maths. Did that for about 8 years or so, and then moved into a software consulting type role in a startup business based in San Francisco. And that was all about helping people, helping large companies plan their kind of future, whether it was financial planning or supply chain planning, any type of planning. It was a really cool software that I loved working with. And I did that for 10 years. The very, again, formula based, but very customer focused. So my role was in a customer success role. And I worked my way up to reporting into the board by the time I left. And there, yeah, so I was always kind of in a role that was related to numbers or related to people. It's something that I love. And in COVID, I got to the point where, like all of us, we questioned our lives and we said, right, what is this all about? And I went from a job where I was traveling all the time, which was lovely. It was hard work, but I was traveling to London every week and seeing my customers. I had customers all over Northern Europe. Um, and then after COVID, there was no budget. They were like, okay, you can move again, but there's no money to bring you down to London to take you anywhere. So I went from a job that was very, very sociable, very customer focused, to one that was sat in front of a computer all the time. And I just thought this can't be it. And I had a really good career. Like, I was very lucky that I'd managed to save up quite a bit of money and just been very careful with money. And so I was at a point where I was like, how long is this going to keep going? Because I'd never had a pay cut and I'd never had a break in my career for 20 years. I'd always worked. And I always had this dream of one day having this knitwear business where you could come to me and say, right, I want to make a specific product, and I would make it, because I do a lot of hand knitting. My hobby's hand knitting. That's what I think of relaxing. That's not work. It's different to coming and using the machines. And I and people used to say to me, "Oh, can you knit me a jumper?" And I'd be like, "No, definitely not. I'm not wasting 40 hours of my time." um, so I just had this idea. I just loved it. So basically, I had this one moment where in COVID, my husband's a tour guide, and so in COVID, his business was completely dead. He went from being very busy in Edinburgh to having no work at all. And so he was not working, and I was working crazy hours on, like we all were, on Zoom calls and stuff like that. Those of us that were lucky enough to work, and and so we had this weird situation where I was desperate for a holiday, he was desperate to not go anywhere and just actually be busy, and I decided to go on holiday for a week on my own, and I went to Madeira and spent a whole week just sitting with a pad and a pen and just thought about what do I want to do with my life. I'm tired of being on the computer, and yeah, just wrote down some ideas, some notes. I had this concept, like I say, of this customizable brand in my head, and then yeah, kind of Woolkind started to come out of the paper and from the pen, and by the time I got home, I spoke to a good friend of mine who gave me some advice, and I basically said to my boss, if you don't let me go down to part time, I'm going to quit. You've got 3 months to work it out for me. Which was interesting, because I was in a senior management role, so I had a team of 24 people reporting to me at the time. And I said to him, I don't want to work 5 days a week, I want to work 3 days a week. So yeah, so we went, and that what happened was he was very good, the best manager I've ever had. And we discussed it, we kind of worked out. We said, right, why don't you just start taking a few like Fridays off? So I started taking Fridays off, and on my Fridays I would plan my business. I would think about what am I going to do, how is this going to work from a manufacturing perspective, from a marketing perspective, from a design perspective. And after a few months of doing that, 4 days a week, it was interesting because nobody in the business knew I was only working 4 days a week. They weren't allowed to know, so it was all kept kind of hush hush. Um, and what I implemented was that I told my team we shouldn't have meetings on a Friday because Fridays were the day to work when you've been in meetings all week. So so everyone else was just having no meetings, and I was off planning Woolkind. And then after about, was it maybe 6 months of that, I kind of, maybe a bit longer than that actually, it got to the point where I was just realizing I wasn't really. As soon as you kind of I found as soon as I left the kind of um, the main work being everything, because I'm very dedicated when I work. I work very hard at things, and so when it wasn't my biggest focus, I just slowly lost bit by bit the kind of passion and the love for that job. And so I got to the point in the new year in 2023, and I was like, right, when am I going to just take the jump here? And gave myself 3 months. I had a few things in the business and holidays that I thought I'm going to test out. If I don't feel any better, I'm going to hand in my notice. And in June 2023, handed in my notice and left.
I guess that's like it when you've really made your mind up, but
Mm.
you're just delaying it, and then you just have to do it.
Yeah, I got to the point where I realized that it was delaying my ultimate goal, and being only able to do 1 day or 2 days a week of planning what was to be my new career. It just wasn't enough time because there's I'd bought the machine by then, so the machine had arrived in sort of January 2023, and it was just 1 day a week was not enough to try and get it to work. So yeah, I just decided to kind of rip the plaster off and go for it.
So the idea was to actually start listening to the people that came to you and wanted you to knit something for them, and charge them for it.
Something like that,
So
yeah.
you bought a big knitting machine. Is that what I see behind you there?
Yes, that's my baby, my Knitwear machine. Um,
Mm.
yeah, it was more of a kind of like just this concept of something. There's a lot of people that I realized that the fashion world's really interesting. Everything is trend focused, so it's all around, what's coming in the next season. It's planned so far in advance. And someone like myself who is not interested actually in the world of fashion as such, I'm interested in the creation, the making, and the kind of construction of it. Like, I don't know if it's because I love maths or numbers or what, but I'm kind of obsessed by the way a knit stitch is created, the loop and how it works. I love it. I'm obsessed by the way the structure builds,
Yeah.
and so one of the reasons I would knit for myself was because I wanted to make clothes that I couldn't find in a shop. So whether it was a fluorescent yellow jumper or just something different that I didn't see anywhere else, that's I would make myself. And when you speak to a lot of knitters and a lot of sewers and people who make their own clothes, it's usually that's the reason. They feel like they want to just be creative and have something for themselves. But then I thought there must be people out there that want that but don't have the skills or the time, and yeah, don't want to learn, or don't, and want someone else to be able to make it for them, but obviously not at a, ridiculous kind of price of a tailored garment. And so that was my hypothesis. And yeah, so I had this idea of creating specific designs that would be custom. The design would be kind of would be sort of set, whether it was a pattern or a shape, and then you would pick your own colors to go with whatever you wanted, whether it was, for this season or whatever, something that you would truly
Yeah.
really love. And someone told me about this, the IKEA effect. I don't know if you've heard of this, but
Not sure.
the idea of the IKEA effect is that when you build something from scratch, so when you build a table that you bought from IKEA, you're more likely to love that table more than another table because you put energy and thought into making it, which seems, so it's like this idea that if you do, I don't know if, sometimes an analogy of, they say it's better to paint your own house because you won't notice any mistakes, whereas if you get someone else to paint it, you'll find every
Yeah,
problem. So
I get that one.
yeah, so
I think the IKEA effect must be something that IKEA themselves came up
well, I
with,
don't know,
because I'm
maybe
not
not, I
sure
don't know.
putting together a flat pack sort of will make me bond with it.
No, it's just the
But
idea that it becomes part of you become part of the process of making it, and it somehow
mm,
connects you somehow. Maybe IKEA, maybe you think of a boring IKEA table, maybe it's not the best example, but it's definitely a thing.
right.
Maybe the marketers came up with it. So this idea that you're part of the process. So yes, I find people just love being able to come and yeah, select colors. It can be overwhelming, it's a lot of choice, and sometimes it's hard to make that choice, especially when it's a big investment. But um, the smiles on their faces when I make them, it's just like such a rewarding thing to be able to do.
Mm. The fact that you're not actually interested in fashion, you're not the first person who says this to me
Mm,
in the clothes industry, because I think either you are sort of in the fashion sphere or you're more in the garment sphere itself.
mm,
And I'm not interested at all in fashion, but I do have a passion for clothes.
mm.
So that's interesting, really.
Yeah, it's interesting. I always feel like I'm almost not allowed to say that because you're expected to be, yeah, just all over it. And I'm really careful about what I read and what I. Someone did say I should probably try to keep up to date with what's on trend so that I know what's coming in the shops and things like that. But I almost just don't want to know. I, I, I really like being inspired by just random things and getting time to just think about, a specific, I don't know, whether you're out for a walk or something, but usually it's about the shape and about the construction and it's about the detail of the garment, and then you throw on the color later. The color is easy to, add.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, when I was younger, I used to always talk about being a fashion designer. It was something I wanted. I don't know, but it was never thought that it was something I would ever do. Um, at
Mm.
school, we weren't allowed to do art and science, and I was always good at science and art, but we weren't allowed to do them both. So I ended up just only doing sciences when I was from sort of 14 upwards. Um, so all that kind of artistic stuff got sent to the side. Um, yeah, but
I get the impression that the fashion part of things is really more of a marketing thing to make us want to buy stuff.
hmm. Yeah,
So,
there's. I think when you look at like kind of the like really high fashion stuff, I'm in awe of that. I've got friends I've met over the past few years who have proper, I say proper fashion brands where they're beautiful. Like you can see it on the catwalk. It's just there's so much creativity and structure and texture, and I really appreciate that. And I would maybe as you get older, I'm less. I don't know. I'm less bothered about wearing those kind of crazy things. But I do admire someone, and I love seeing those types of clothes. It's when it becomes about maybe I've been distracted by, you know, the high street and fast fashion, and when it comes to just churning out stuff, and that's just kind of dims the I don't know, the excitement of it all. And I think
mm,
with the way the world is, with the planet and the amount of clothes that are being produced, it feels wrong to be trying to create something that is just constantly about creating new all the time. I don't want to be. I've started doing wholesale, and I'm very cautious about getting into working with shops like fashion kind of boutiques and stuff because I'm
yeah.
I'm worried about about the demand that's going to be put on me to create new stuff regularly, and I don't want to. I don't want to feel like I'm being pulled towards that cycle of seasons. Um, so it's something I'm very aware of.
Is that something you're able to avoid when wholesaling to shops?
I don't know. I've only been like,
Or can you have a range of 6 staple items that you're just refilling all the time? Or
yeah, I think there's a way of doing it, and maybe there's a little bit of tweaking some colors here and there without it being ridiculous. But I don't know. It's going to be an interesting journey for the next year or so, trying to connect more and more with those types of shops.
I can see how that could be tricky.
Hmm. But it's finding the right. It's not. It's maybe then finding the right types of shops that are more interested in the story and the ethical side of it and are happy, and they, yes, they want to have something new that customers are going to want to buy, but like I say, you can, I've got so many colors already to pick from. There's always I'm always almost in I'm almost always on trend in some way, because someone says that this color's coming, I'm like, well, I've already got it. So yeah, it's quite funny.
Well, I mean, fashion and trends is about obsoleting what has gone before it as well. So, I mean, by necessity, that does mean that if you're going to be trendy, you have to keep buying
Hmm.
new stuff. So, for your own part, I think to keep your vision and creativity pure, you might want to have a blinkered view on
Hmm.
fashion. So,
Yeah, I kind of see when I think of new things, I think of, you know, where what I've created so far, where it's going. It's usually about adding a new category or a new piece to the collection that is very different to what I've already got. So whether it's a new garment or something that is slowly building the, almost like a Woolkind wardrobe, so you can have all your pieces that that deal with different situations, whether it's you're in the freezing cold or you're in the summer, and building out that piece rather than it being about, you know, lots of versions of the same product. That's the way I kind of see it.
I think it's so strange to see that people I know who have shops are now in Paris for the fashion week buying the stuff that will be delivered sometime over in the new year, which will be next summer's
Hmm.
collection, whilst they're now heavily discounting last year's or this year's stuff, trying to get rid of that
Hmm.
before the autumn stuff arrives in a few weeks now, I think.
Hmm.
I mean, it's just crazy. So doing what something like you do, where it's a lot of it is to
Hmm.
order and it's not trend driven, does seem like a very good starting point for doing things better.
Yeah, because it was starting from scratch, so it was more of thinking about it from every kind of angle, from an ethics perspective, and thinking about like what is the lowest waste possible. And so from day one, in day one, it was all made to order. I have shifted a little bit to a small stock. When we say small, I mean because I've got lots of colors and things, I usually have maybe two of anything at one time. I don't really make more than that. Sometimes a bit more of my best sellers, as I have done a bit more wholesale just to have a little bit of stock for the shops, but it's not, we're talking like in the single digits here. Um, so it just always feels right, because the idea of making lots of product and then having it go on sale because I've got too much stock just feels
Yeah.
bizarre. And and also it, from, because I manufacture everything myself as well, the idea I've got to create it all first, I've got to make it all first, and then I've got to sell it. So it's actually extra work. Whereas the simplest thing is just to try and get people to love it and order it, and then I only have to make it when it's time. So it's a slightly different approach that doesn't make sense from a volume. If you're wanting lots of volume, it doesn't make sense. But I'm not trying to.
So everything you make now is actually knitted on the machine behind you.
So the machine does the knitting, and then everything else is done by hand. There's a lot of hand finishing. So my tank tops, which I launched a month ago, this is my first, I would say, proper garment. Um, they take about an hour and a half on the machine. So they come off. There's about 5 panels that come off. So the front, the back, and then the trims. And then it takes me about 2.5 hours to hand basically put it all together. And that includes things like I've got these linking machines which are next to me here, but they're what do the seaming. I don't know if you know a linking machine, but it's like a creates like a crochet hook, a crochet chain to hold the
Yeah.
knitting together. But then all the seams, like the joins and you can see in the yellow trim, it's in the back here actually, and under the arms, all done by hand. So I literally hand seam them all, Um, I just I've taken everything I know from hand knitting and applied it to the machine. I've never had any formal training on the machine, so I've not had that kind of fashion background of working in a knitwear factory or any sort of placement. It's all just kind of self-taught. And so it's interesting when I do meet other knitters who are kind of more in the fashion kind of industrial world, the way I've approached doing my designs is slightly different because I think about it like from as if I was doing it by hand. How would I make the machine make it look good?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's just the way I approach. Because, like I say, I get a bit obsessive about things. So whether it's ethics and making sure everything, like I beat myself up if I can't do something exactly the way I want to do it. Maybe too much, probably too much. Um, but also when it comes to details in the product, it's got to look so good that no one would ever be able to pick up on anything. Um, and it's the same when I like say when I put as much energy into making this as I would make myself a jumper. Now this is not the best business. It's probably not the best business, but I just I want someone to really love what they get. It's really really important to me. And in the 3 years I've been on sale, I think I've had one return because someone was allergic to wool, and that's
And
it.
you beat yourself up about that.
Yeah, but that's it. I've
Uh,
never. Yeah, I've never
I
had.
mean, I was about to say that you're not making life easy for yourself, are you?
No,
You're putting too much effort into it, too much time.
I don't know if it's too much time. It's the right. I think it's probably not enough time. I I would I when it comes to making something like a tank top, right? I would rather take my time, make it the way I want to, and do it well, than feel like I'm rushing and not enjoy the process. My Woolkind's all about joy. It's about joyful clothing, but it's also got to feel joyful for me. And if I'm not enjoying the process, then I just won't do it. So so I price things based on that as well. So when I price things, I really try to think about, yes, I try to be efficient and I want to be as fast as I can be, but not so fast that I cut corners when it comes to quality. So I kind of take all that into account, and I kind of again because it's made to order, it's kind of on the my approach is if that's the cost it's going to be to make, that's just the cost it is. And if you want all the bells and whistles when it comes to sustainability, ethics, and traceable supply chains, and biodegradable packaging, and organic cotton labels, and all the things I do to try and kind of uphold that value, then that's the cost. And it is a luxury item. Nobody needs a tank top from Woolkind. It's not going to, it's not something that is going to make or break your life. So I accept that it's something special, and you should, yeah, I feel like it deserves the effort that goes into it. And if it costs a bit more than another brand, then fine. I don't have to make it if you don't want it. That's my,
I think what you're saying about it costs what it costs is very sensible because you could have cut lots of corners, and I'm sure high street brands, if you compare
mm,
what you're doing with them, I know they'll change buttons, they'll change thread, they'll reduce pockets, they'll anything to keep the cost down. But making something as good as you can make it is a very compelling thing to do.
I went to see do you know Patrick Grant?
Yes.
Yes. So I went to see a talk by Patrick Grant was it last year? He was up in Edinburgh because it's where he was born. And he was talking about his book. And he was explaining that in sort of the history of mankind, everything that was created was always there was always this kind of ambition to be better, to make things faster, to make things bigger, to make things better quality. It was always about making things better, and it's only been in sort of he said it's only been since sort of the 1970s and 80s, and when we started to produce plastic, um, that everything's become about how fast can we make it, how cheap can we make it, how quick can we make it. And it was really interesting kind of thing because I think that's we were all about how much money can we make rather than can we make the best thing possible. And I'd rather make the best thing possible, just any day of the week.
Mm. I think that also tallies with the change in focus between the things we need and the things we want.
Mm,
But that might have been a bit further back in time where you might actually need a shirt,
hmm
but now you might actually want 2 dozen shirts.
hmm
and that means fashion marketing, making stuff cheaper, more profits.
Hmm.
So, I mean, people liked earning money in the olden days as well. It's not
Yeah,
kind of new.
yeah, but it's funny because it doesn't have to not be profitable and it doesn't have to not make money. Like I'm an accountant. Like I understand my numbers better than probably most small businesses I know. I obsess over my numbers because I want to know that what I'm doing is going to work.
It has to be
It
viable.
has to be viable, and sustainability is about being viable. It's about creating a business that is long term. Um, but actually, we've created a world where everything is so much about volume, where we've devalued the the skills of someone who actually creates something, who makes something, especially in clothing, um, to the point that the only way it works is by churning stuff out and selling as much as you can and beating the other brand because you're cheaper. When actually, I'm trying to come at it from a completely different perspective and say, actually, if I have to make a quarter of what another brand makes, but I'm still making the same revenue, I don't mind. If I'm making a quarter of the items, but so I think it just depends on where you fit into the market and how it works. But I do think there's definitely a problem with our society at the moment where people are are being encouraged to just buy all the time when we definitely don't need it, Yeah.
Mm. And of course, if it was cheap and it's off trend, you don't really worry about the fact that it didn't last that long either, because you've already bought two new ones.
Yeah.
I guess.
And they're all built, the pricing, even the cheap prices are all built. The pricing structure built into them is all based on the idea that they're going to go on sale. So a lot of a lot of the architecture within the numbers itself is all got all these margins built in so that they can deal with that. So when you really strip it back to the actual cost of the garment, it's peanuts. It's very little that's actually gone into to making it. Um,
Mm.
yeah, but I guess
I mean, if you were going to sort of make your stuff at half the price, I mean, what would you change? Wool sourcing?
what would I
Is
change?
it possible to find cheaper wool?
I could get cheaper wool, definitely. My wool is I took me a year to find my wool supplier. Um,
Okay.
uh, but the labor cost is the highest cost in the product, not the wool. So you would be outsourcing. I could outsource even within Scotland. It would be cheaper to take a micro factory or a big factory. I could outsource obviously to to Asia or to other parts of Europe.
Yeah.
Um, I would uh, I wouldn't be worrying about whether my packaging is compostable or recyclable. I would be just buying whatever I can. I wouldn't. There's a lot of things I could do to make things cheaper, but
Mm.
I don't do them. For example, um, here's one. I've got a scarf here. So this is the bottom of the scarf. So it's got what this grey yarn is what is called waste yarn. So the machine has to knit a bunch of rows of knitting so it can grab on with the rollers to pull the tension when it starts to create the scarf.
Okay.
Now, any other manufacturer, any other knitwear manufacturer I know of, almost every one of them, will cut that off, throw it in the bin straight away. It'll probably be
Yeah.
polyester or polyester blend because it's strong and it's cheap. And I've been to factories, small factories, and they've got literally bags and bags of these of waste. And my machine produces more waste than probably a more industrial machine would, but it just creates bags of waste. For me, I'm like, I can't cope with that. I can't throw that out. So I, first of all, only use cotton because I just do not want plastic anywhere near my business. Um, and when it comes off the machine, I wind it back up. I rewind it all up and then reuse it over and over again. And until it
Okay.
gets
So,
to the point where it completely falls apart and it just can't cope, I'll just keep going.
yeah. I mean, why not? It takes minutes to
Yeah,
take it apart, doesn't it?
it
So,
does, and that costs though. Minutes do cost when it comes to.
yeah.
Um, it's amazing how the small kind of things impact the pricing, but again, it's what would I rather have? Would I rather have a box full of a big black bags full of waste, or actually be proud of the fact that in the 3 years I've been doing this, I've not created a single bit of rubbish that's gone in the bin.
And I guess if you were just ordering in stuff from other makers, would you be Woolkind?
Well, exactly. Um, I don't know. It's a difficult one. Um, I tried a little bit of outsourcing to another brand, to a microfactory in Scotland, just to test how it felt. Um, and it was good. They produced exactly the same with my wool. I sent them my wool, and they're very good makers. It's just a weird feeling. I'd rather have full control. And when I first went to meet my yarn supplier in Italy, he said to me, that Massimo, who's the CEO, he said, why are you not designing and getting someone else to make? Why have you bought a machine? And I was like, I want control. I want to know everything.
Well, I mean, from a business point of view, I mean, that is a valid question, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
Because
not a
it
good
would
idea.
make sense.
It's not a good idea.
Yeah.
It's the hard way to do it. But um, I, as you probably realize, I don't really always take the easy route. So
No, but I mean, if you'd had a background in manufacturing and, I mean, had a big, huge growth strategy because you were going to have a much bigger house in 10 years'
mm,
time and you had to sell thousands and thousands of sweaters. It's the other way of looking at it, isn't it?
mm. Yeah, and
Because
yeah,
so many small companies, some of them are happy being small because that's what they want to be. And others, you can tell that the moment they start up, they're already planning to sell out in a year or two
mm.
to some investment company and then move on to something new.
Yeah. It's interesting because my when I worked for my previous job, so the company was a startup, like I say, when I joined in 2015. Yeah. So I was there for 8 years, and it was all about growth, always about growth. And every time we looked at anything, it was how, imagine you had to not do one thing, what you had to sell one project. Imagine you had to sell 1,000 projects. You were always thinking about how could I scale in that way. And sometimes I sit down and I think about that with with Woolkind and think, how would I push this? But I and sometimes I really do struggle with what do I really want from this? Like, where does this go? Um, but for now, I'm happy with the kind of pace I'm going at. I'm doing well. Like, this year alone, I'm like 80% up year over year from a sales perspective. The numbers are looking really good. So it's working. It's just trying to work out where it goes longer term. But I think if I start to think like that, I'll start to obsess over that as well, and I try not to worry too much.
Yeah.
Because I am an overthinker, so it's best to just try and stay in the moment. Um, but yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about. But what is important is that you are making a profit and you're paying yourself properly, or at least building it into your business that it's viable long term.
Yeah.
Because it's quite easy to underprice yourself. My tank tops, for example, they retail at lower than other brands that are making them in factories, where you get to pick from three colors and using
Yeah.
wool that is, I would argue, is not as good quality as mine. And so then sometimes I think to myself, I'm undervaluing my product. But again, maybe over time that'll change. But
It's all about finding customers that value what you're doing, I guess,
mm,
because some customers, unless there's a little polo figure on the chest or something like that,
mm,
they won't even consider it. So you need customers who value other aspects of it.
mm,
And I mean, at the end of the day, how many items can you make in a year versus how many customers do you actually need? I
mhm.
mean, you're not trying to appeal to everyone.
No, I'm not. Definitely not. Um, I the whole capacity thing is, and the volume sales thing is an interesting balance, and a lot of my pricing is based on that as well, because there is only so much I can make in a day. So I've structured my pricing around it, and at some point I would like to invest in a new machine that will improve that production, so I can then hire people, maybe if someone one or two people around in the studio to help with the making or the marketing and stuff like that. So that is long term. Medium term, that's probably something I would like to work on. Um, but it is interesting what you're saying about the kind of what people are willing to buy. I've done markets in the past where you get a very clear sense that people really want the brand, they want the 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 logo that they know, and then there's the other people that just want the cheap and cheerful thing. But I'm definitely finding this group of customers who do value quality and they value the sustainability, but what they really value is being able to buy something that nobody else has. And they're willing to pay for it because they love the idea of
Elitist.
making something special. Yeah, it's that's quite nice because, and I have customers of different kind of. Some of my customers have the money and it's not a big investment for them, and then there's other customers who are saving up and they're trying to put aside some money for a piece that I make. And so I'm always trying to think of ways, how do I make it as accessible as possible, without hurting the business. So it's an interesting balance. I've thought of some really interesting ideas, but I've not implemented them all yet.
You
Around
could have
wool.
sort of bring your own sheep day,
I don't know if that
supply
would
your own
help.
wool. I don't know. I mean, what sort of wool do you use? And you mentioned it comes from Italy,
Yeah,
but is it merino? Is it sheep? Is it lamb? Is it
yeah.
recycled?
So it's merino wool. It's lamb's wool from a merino. So it comes from Australia. So the farms are in Australia. Like most of the merino wool in the garment industry comes from there. It is the wool is all from the first clip. So it's the sort of from the baby lamb. The first time they ever get the sheared, that's the wool that the yarn brand um, acquires. And what they do is they actually have direct relationships with the farms themselves. So the mills in Italy, in the north of Italy, and they have these direct relationships, which means they actually pay above market rate for the wool because they want the best quality. It's about 18.5 microns in thickness, which is just a bit thicker than cashmere. So cashmere is about 15 microns. It's very fine for merino wool. You can get finer merino wool, and actually they produced some new yarn last year, which is 15.5 microns. I've got two samples of it. I've not played with it yet, but that's if you really want to level up your wool feelings.
Does
Um,
that make much of a difference? Can you feel it? Can you tell?
it's different in terms of the weight. Like cashmere's got um, a lot of halo around it. So there's the concept of like the fluff, that kind of and so it's very lightweight, and
Yeah.
so it feels very soft in that respect. I, you notice, I think you notice that more than than you think, but it's very subtle. A lot of people think what I have is cashmere because it's very soft. Um, so the wool comes into Italy directly, and then that's where they do all the washing and the spinning and the dyeing, and then it comes straight to me. So there's basically one middleman between me and the farm, and then I produce it. And every cone of yarn I have can be traced back to the farm it came from, so I can get the details and know exactly what's been involved, what chemicals are used, people that are involved in the process. So that was very important to me, traceability. I think when the world's full of sort of drop shipping and all these businesses just create selling stuff that they don't even know where it's come from, as a consumer, I always felt like I want to know everything about something. I want you to tell me every piece of it and where it came from. So again, from day one, it was about how do I find something that's traceable and yeah, I can answer any questions someone has about where their scarf came from.
So a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of focus now on recycling textiles and fabrics and fibers. Um, has that been an option for you at all?
Um, Not so much for, I've explored it, but the problem is that when you start to recycle the actual wool itself and try to create a yarn from wool, that's like, so imagine you take a jumper like this or something and you want to create a recycled wool, you've got to chop it up. So you end up, what you do is you chop up the wool into small pieces and then have to put it back together. And so the problem with that from a quality perspective is that you end up with a yarn that is actually not going to last that long because it's just made up of tiny little fibers. So from a sort of bobbling perspective or just a general wear and tear perspective, it just won't last the same way that a virgin wool would. And I've always kind of had this weird feeling about I'm all up for recycling what we can, and I love it. I do everything I can to reuse what I can. But when it comes to something like a wool, it just felt like natural. The whole process of wool being produced, the whole cycle of wool is such a natural thing that if a garment's at the point where it's dying, or not dying, but like it's at the end of its life, then just let it go
Yeah,
back to nature.
expiring.
Just let it, yeah, just let it go back. Decompose it, send it back to the earth. That's always my kind of,
Because
yeah.
I did see one of the more notorious sort of sustainable fashion influencers pushing sweaters that were made from recycled wool, but then had 30% polyester in them, which was necessary to prop up
Hmm.
the functionality of the wool. Because, as you said, I mean, it was degraded and cut up and short. But in that case, it was sort of okay to add the synthetics. And I was struggling with the concept here
Yeah, no, I'd really have
because,
an issue with
I mean,
that.
that can't, you can't recycle that again because now you've got a mixed fiber product.
Yeah, and polyester, polyester is just terrible. Um, yeah, yeah, that's a very interesting, sales pitch to try and explain to someone that this is like, you know, yeah, a sustainable choice. I find, yeah, the whole thing about polyester, I find quite upsetting actually, especially this concept of recycled polyester, which is a complete and utter myth. So, recycled polyester is made from old plastic bottles, usually. Old plastic bottles that normally
Yeah,
can be
or,
recycled.
or new ones.
Yeah, maybe a new one, you know, that can be recycled, number of, numerous times again into more recycled bottles. But as soon as you create recycled polyester, it can never be recycled ever again. It's another plastic that's even worse because it's now used up a recyclable product and created something. So yeah, I I nowadays I wouldn't I'm so picky with what I buy now that I don't buy anything with clothing wise that has any plastic in it at all, which is very difficult to do. But it's just my obsessive personality.
I mean, it is difficult because where do you sort of draw the line? I was talking to my wife the other day about polycotton sewing thread because I spoke to someone who'd bought a one of these Henley shirts, t-shirt type things, and they spilled something on it, and it needed washing, and then it completely distorted, and it turned out that the sewing thread was all natural cotton,
Hmm.
which apparently shrunk at a different ratio than the rest of the garment. I don't know if it's plausible or not, but that was the explanation that she'd been given by the maker, I think. And it's like, but where do we draw the line? I mean, polycotton thread, that's a tiny little part of the garment, but it does
Yeah.
have polyester in it.
It does, and it's a microplastic. I don't know. Like I use organic cotton labels and organic cotton thread to sew them on. Even most organic cotton labels that you buy have polyester um, woven into the top of them, so you can use a hot press to cut them. So
Yeah.
trying to find a label was very difficult as well. They didn't have that. When I make clothes myself, so I started making jeans for myself last year, and again, I didn't want to use polyester thread because it's what you would normally use, and pretty much every clothing manufacturer in the world is using polyester thread
Yeah.
because it's stronger. But I think it's just making a choice. Oh, I don't know, making a choice. I chose to use 100% cotton thread. I've not had an issue with it shrinking at different, but
I don't know.
it's
I
definitely not
don't
as
know.
strong. But what I do is I triple stitch it, so I do it 3 times to make it extra strong. Um, but yeah, it's funny because I made these jeans and they don't fit me perfectly, and I was been thinking recently I just need them adjusted. I'm going to go to a tailor and get them adjusted, and the first thing that goes through my mind is they're going to adjust it with polyester thread, and I need to say to them, "Do you mind using cotton?" And they'll probably tell me no, they don't want to use it. So yeah, it's a
Uh, there's a tiny bit of irony there, isn't it? That you make yourself a pair of trousers, and then you have to go and get them
yeah.
adjusted.
I've put on a bit of weight, and I've got 3 pairs I made on the same sort of same pattern, and they were all slightly tweaked as I was learning more about my shape. And then I've learned, I think I now know what I need to do, and I now need to go and cut them all open again. I just don't have the time really to do it. So I was thinking maybe that's a nice, easy way of supporting another local maker and getting myself a pair of jeans, 3 pairs of jeans that actually will fit better than they do right now.
You could also make a fourth pair, but then embrace the bagginess and have a pair of trousers that would last you forever.
this is I've already got I bought myself some raw Japanese denim, which was
Okay.
really beautiful. I haven't put the scissors to it yet. I can't cut it until until I get the pattern just
Ah,
right. But that's my final. That's the goal is the pair of all pairs. Yeah,
right. Well, once you've fully learnt the trade, you can then
yeah.
make your masterpiece.
I wouldn't mind if they were a wee bit baggy. The problem is they're not. It's the opposite way around. They're just too tight. So yeah, they're a wee bit uncomfortable to wear at the moment.
Is often the way, yes. So you set out to make the highest quality you can make. I mean, you must feel compelled when going to other shops to check out what the competition are doing. I mean, do you have horror stories there? Do you see really bad stuff, or is there a lot of good stuff being made?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Actually, yesterday I went out for dinner with a friend and we ended up walking around the shops, which is quite rare for me. Um, but it is I don't go shopping that much for clothes because I don't trust the shops. I don't trust the high street at all. You don't know what you're getting. That's my kind of general feeling of it all. Um,
Hmm.
I
What would you be afraid of getting?
I would be
I
afraid of,
mean,
yes, I'd be afraid of getting something that is been made in a sweatshop or some way, or and the labor is not, people haven't been paid properly. Um, if it's got wool in it, I'd definitely be afraid that it's not, the animals haven't been treated well. That would be a big
mm,
thing. Um, I just don't trust the fiber content. So I just don't trust these brands anymore. I remember a few years ago, it was during COVID actually. I met with one friend and we went to H&M, and this was kind of a turning point because I hadn't been shopping for a long time, and and so it was, he wanted to go and look, so we went to H&M and there was a wool jumper, and I thought, oh, that's interesting because I was in my journey of looking for wool for Woolkind, and they had this big label that said RWS wool. And now RWS is the Responsible Wool Standard, which is the kind of global, the main global certification you can get for wool to be, that is sort of mulesing free, so the animals are treated well, and good quality husbandry and stuff like that. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. H&M are, trying. And
yeah,
I looked at the label, and I still remember this to this day. There was 7% wool in this product, and it was, and the main selling point was it was a wool jumper, and you're just like, what? 93% acrylic.
it's like calling a bicycle a car because it's got two wheels.
Yeah, exactly. It's just bizarre. So you're just, unless you know what you're doing and you really kind of understand what all the terms mean, um, and you look through it's so hard to know what, and you even don't even know if they're telling you the truth. So in the UK, I don't know what it's like in Norway, but in the UK, you don't even have to tell people when you buy a piece of clothing where it's been made. It's not a legal requirement. And the only reason that the high street tend to have that on their labels is because they create labels that they sell all around the world. And in some parts of the world, you do need to say that.
Yeah.
So they have to create a label that is multilingual and can deal with any sort of market that they're selling in. But in the UK, you don't have to do that. So sometimes you see products that just say, they say what they're made of, but 100% wool could mean a lot of things as well. Does what kind of wool? Where's the wool from?
I often wonder whether these labels are even honest. I mean, who's
Yeah.
going to sort of rumble them if they aren't honest?
Mm.
I saw recently there's this sort of scanner being developed where you can just blip clothes and using some magic technology, it will then put on the screen the fiber content.
Ah, okay.
And I was thinking, "Ooh, that looks brilliant. I'd love one of those." I think they're about £4,000.
Okay.
So my enthusiasm waned somewhat, but it did seem like a brilliant idea. That was for use in recycling plants, though, where I mean, sometimes the labels will be snipped off. Other times, I mean, it just takes too much time to be finding the labels on all of them, but they could just blip, 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 blip. 100% wool, 100% cotton, something vile mix.
Yeah, that's quite cool.
Um,
Yeah, because you just don't know what.
at,
Yeah.
least, at least it would take care of a tiny little part of textile recycling,
Mm.
the actual sorting bit. So you might manage to quickly sort out what has at least a little potential.
Hmm.
But a wool sweater with 7% wool, that's you can't call that a wool sweater.
I know it's a sad thing, but they do anything to try and sell you something because it sounds quality, it sounds high quality, but it's clearly not. So yeah.
Hmm. I'm completely
The other
bamboozled.
thing, the other thing, the other thing, the other thing that's interesting is just the construction of things is so much everything because everything's about how cheap can I make it. The actual
Yeah.
the quality of how it's produced and made is also quite interesting when you go to most brands and high streets. Even simple things like this. So this is like I say, my tank tops. These arms here. They're what we call a sandwich trim. So the the actual piece of yellow goes all the way around both sides. So
Yeah.
I have to put this onto the machine onto the linking machine and then put the sort of raw edge of the garment onto that and then fold over the yellow piece and then link along there. That's quite a lot of steps. It's quite a complicated thing to make. And there are simpler ways to make it, but the cheaper you go, the the sort of more and more rudimental something like an armhole becomes. So you would have, no trim on it, and it would just be knitted in. And I was in the shops, some really nice, I guess, some nice high street shops yesterday that would class themselves as premium brands, and you can just tell it's just been how fast can we make this, and it just looks terrible. It's just the edging's horrible. Um, yeah, I think details are important. I think they matter, especially if you want something that's going to last. But not everyone
Do you think there's
cares.
a disconnect between the factories, who I guess to describe themselves as white label factories
Mm.
because they're making for brands, and the brands in who is responsible for the end result?
Um,
That if you're not manufacturing under your own name, you're not actually that concerned about it being super good quality.
Maybe not.
Or being
And
conspiracy minded.
Yeah, and actually, like I say, I was walking around Edinburgh's kind of main shopping centre yesterday, and you got brands like you've got the shops like H&M and Zara, but you've also got, Hugo Boss and Ralph Lauren and stuff in the same shopping centre, and you walk around them, and the truth is that you can't really tell. None of them anymore. They just become so run of the mill. Nothing screams quality. Nothing says I want to be different. Everything's got massive 50% off sale signs. And
Yeah.
it's just I don't know, it's just I don't know why you would want to buy from a brand that is just churning stuff out all the time. It's just, yeah. They're obviously not very good at identifying the trends if they can't even pick the things that people are going to buy.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, they don't just make a sort of set of staple items but that you have to have hundreds of items, and
Yeah,
some of them might really hit home, and others are just, oh, yeah.
yeah,
But Scottish knitwear in general does have a fantastic reputation. I mean, I'm a big fan of some of the Scottish makers and lambswool sweaters. Lambswool really does it for me. That's a perfect sort of mix of softness and comfort.
yeah,
Uh, a lot of British knitwear in 100% sheep's wool tends to be a bit harsh. But I mean, Scottish lambswool sweaters, nice fair isle pattern or
yeah.
something. Yeah,
So
can
so
like
that's an
that.
interesting. Lambswool's a very contentious subject for me. Um, when you say lambswool, what do you mean?
It says lambswool on the label
Okay,
or in the blurb. It's soft. It's not carpet
yeah.
fiber.
So if I was to tell you, and where do you think that lambswool comes from?
Small young sheep, I'd imagine,
And where are those sheep?
in Britain somewhere.
So what if I was to tell you that the term lambswool is true? It's coming from a sheep that is a lamb, but it's actually a fashion term used um, to describe wool that is imported into the UK and spun into yarn.
I'd say you're a very mean man, destroying my fantasies.
So, so I often get asked the question, why don't you use Scottish lambswool? And particularly Scottish lambswool because I'm in Scotland. But if you were to all the lambswool that is kind of spun in the UK, pretty much, is imported merino that is brought in from Australia, South Africa, and southern America, and pretty much all of it is brought via somewhere like China, where it's gone to be washed and scoured, and they buy it in as cleaned, what they call tops or open tops, and then it's spun in the UK. It's like the concept of Scottish cashmere. Scottish cashmere is not from a Scottish goat; it's from a goat that's in Mongolia or somewhere else, and it's bought the
Because there is only a very small
yeah.
region where
But it's the same with
cashmere
lamb's
goat
wool. So
comes
lamb's wool is this term that's used to describe the spinning, almost like the spinning technique from, but it is from a lamb, um,
from. Okay.
but it's not usually from any wool that's come an actual sheep that's from the UK. So
Where do you think it comes from?
it usually is from Australia or
Okay.
yeah. So when someone says to me, "Why don't you use Scottish lamb's wool?" implying that my wool isn't as good because it's imported, I then
Yeah.
have to explain that actually they've probably come from roughly the same place, but I feel more comfortable by the route that mine is taken and the process and the traceability of mine versus a lamb's wool that's spun in the UK. And that's an interesting conversation. Unless you're
This was my.
buying, unless you're buying actual Shetland sheep from Shetland, so like a proper Fair Isle jumper from Shetland, which is not so
Uh,
soft, um, or a British wool with a British wool mark symbol on it, then you're unlikely to be buying something with wool from the UK.
and those are quite rare to see.
They are. There's more and more British wool stuff, and there's kind of a resurgence of that, and it's definitely a different type of wool. It's a bit more rustic. There are soft varieties of British wool because there's lots of different breeds, um, but it just depends on what you're using it for. Like I personally wouldn't want to have anything. Merino's great for being against your skin, but if you had something a bit
Uh,
coarser around my neck, I don't think I would love it. I do personally hand knit with a lot of Scottish wool and British wool generally to make myself jumpers, like an Aran jumper or something. But um, yeah, the lamb's wool thing's a bit of an interesting topic, I find.
yeah. I'm about as disappointed as when I was in the Hebrides and I saw the black-faced sheep standing around, and I commented, "How cool it is to see the sheep that go into the Tweed here." And it's like, "Oh no, no, that all goes to the mainland to be used in carpets, and then we get all the wool from the mainland over to be used in the Tweed." Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic. I'm actually doing, as part of the Edinburgh Fringe, I'm actually doing a whole talk about this whole thing. So every day through the month of August. I'm doing a little talk about sustainability and sourcing of wool because I was the same as you. I thought I was going to get Scottish lamb's wool, and that would be the obvious thing to bring into to Woolkind. But after doing some digging and lots of questions, and yeah, I kind of made a slightly different choice.
It is astonishing how clothes, both in their component form and in their discarded form, can travel almost around the world. I mean, from literally kind of halfway
Yeah,
around the
yeah,
world just to be made, and then we throw them away and they end up in some desert somewhere literally half the world away
yeah. They get
again.
sent, but yeah, or they get sent to Ghana or somewhere, the beaches of some other country. Yeah, and that's the thing. It was like, yeah, it is a weird sometimes from a purely kind of environmental perspective. It does feel a bit uncomfortable. Like I say, bringing wool from Italy that's come from again from Australia. Um, that's the only part of the business that I would like to change at some point if I could, but it's difficult because most of the small producers in Scotland or in the UK that are making the types of wool that I would want aren't able to make it in a commercially viable way that actually is able to be used on the machine that I've got. And there's a lot of decisions and a lot of factors that need to be taken into account. Um, but yeah, if you were to buy from a sort of traditional brand in the UK or anywhere really, you've what's happened to the fiber is you've got a sheep in Australia. It's been sent to China. The fleece has been sent to China to be washed. That's then been sent to a spinner somewhere else. So it could be somewhere like Turkey or Scotland or anywhere, Portugal. That's then sent to the factory to be made. The factory then sends it to the brand's warehouse. That's then sent to a store, and then you buy it. So I don't know how many steps that is, seven maybe. Um, So
And that's best case.
that's usually what's happening. Um, and they might go through some sort of wholesale, agent, all sorts of other pieces. And so I've always felt at least comfortable that mine has got kind of one step between me and the farm, and that feels quite good. I'd love it to be closer to home. There is a merino wool farm up in Fife now, but unfortunately, it's such a small kind of crop every year that it's kind of hard to, and the weather affects things, so it's kind of hard to at the moment get a batch of it that would work with my machine. But maybe it's something.
You could only make small sizes.
Yeah. And maybe some sort of limited edition, yeah, tiny wee doll jumpers or something.
But I think it's not lovely to see that small companies, I mean tiny companies, care so deeply about doing things in a much better way, and I mean clearly have the will and capacity to do this. Whereas the larger companies get, the more of a problem it is for them to do so. Um,
Yeah, it's not just in clothing. I've met a lot of makers over the past few years, and a lot of them, most of them, really think about where their stuff is coming from. They do want to be sustainable, ethical, whatever you want to call it. They do think about this more than the big brands. I think the problem is that you become, as you grow, it becomes growth for the sake of growth, and I think brands, they might have funding, they might have gone public. The demands on the business to make more profit outweigh everything else, and
yeah.
you end up in a situation where it's not about the quality anymore. It's not about producing something good. It's about producing something cheap so you can sell it at the higher price because you've got a brand now, that people expect to be good, and they're willing to pay hundreds of pounds for something, but actually the reality is it's not worth anything like that. So, yeah, I think growth is an interesting thing because, like, going back to the conversation we just had about where you want, where you want to be, I look at a lot of the ways that you can grow a business, and again, from my finance kind of background, I'm very cautious of a lot of the sort of obvious ways of growing. So whether it's marketing through Instagram or through Google or through getting, loans and investment, I do think there's a lot of caution to be had around taking these types of approach. And I understand why people do it, but luckily so far I've been able to kind of stay away from that. Um, yeah, because I think you can end up in a vicious cycle where you're selling products and you're paying a lot of money towards marketing, and you have to put your prices up because the marketing cost gets higher because there's more competition. Um, and so you end up, the only thing you can do is squeeze your prices, squeeze your costs, because you need to make as much profit or if not more because of your needs to produce more, to take on more staff, all those things that come with growth. So it's a it's an interesting that's a whole
It is
interesting conversation around economics of growth of a business that I think is quite.
because the maths have to
They
work,
have to work, yeah,
otherwise.
because eventually they burst if they don't. So
I mean, I'm sure if you spoke to a management consultant about your model of making things to order in small batches and caring deeply about things, it'd be quite dismissive.
possibly. I always think someone said to me, "You should go on Dragon's Den." And I was like, "I don't think I should." If I went on Dragon's Den, I think they would think, my business model doesn't make any sense. Um, ironically, I think at scale it does make a lot of sense. I probably make more profit per item than most, brands, because I'm because of the made to order. It's just getting enough people and enough volume of customer within reason to make it that the demand is there all year round. And I think that will come, and then it'll be an interesting kind of decision as to how I deal with that. But um, for now, it's going all right.
Tell me a bit about the customers that do find you. Are they all people who walk in the door? Is it all online? Is it
So yeah, so
how does that work?
for the first few years, I did a lot of kind of in person events, so like markets and like London and a lot in Edinburgh, and so I was finding a lot of locals um, and people from sort of tourists that were coming to Edinburgh. But I found that wasn't, when I really took a step back and looked at it again from a profit perspective, it was actually not that good. I was working lots of time on, in person at events and not able to produce because I was, running a shop or running a market stall. And actually, your exposure is quite limited. It's all dependent on who's walking through the door that day and who accidentally stumbled across your business. So last winter, I heavily lent into that. So I actually did 50 days of markets between October and December. I was exhausted.
Wow.
And when I looked at the kind of numbers at the end of the quarter, I thought, actually, I've not made that much profit. And so
Right.
I kind of took a step back this year. And so far this year, I've not done a single day of a market, and I plan to do no markets whatsoever. And I've completely shifted my model to an online and a bit of wholesale kind of approach. I do have a shop space in the studio that people can come to on a Saturday or book an appointment, but um, my brand is it's only people that really know that I'm here that come. So that's kind of it's not that busy. Um, but yeah, I find Instagram's been an interesting way to grow in the past sort of 6 months. I've started to really understand how to use it properly without paying for it and finding my true customers and building a bit of a community. It's a really nice feeling. And so it's just, but that's been a whole new sort of skill set to learn and understanding how to really attract the right people and make them care about
Yeah.
what you're doing. But so
I
far, so
often
far, so good.
wonder how small brands actually. I mean, if you're one person and you're making stuff, you might be shipping stuff, you're
Mm.
taking care of accounts, you're ordering stuff, you're also doing social media, answering emails. I mean, that must be sort of burnout alley.
It is exhausting at times, um, but then I find that doing the markets were more exhausting because I was having to produce stock to sell that I didn't know was going to
Yeah.
sell, and then I would be, like I say, on kind of performing the whole time I was there. So I'd have to be, Mr. Customer Service for 30 days in a row or 5 days in a row or whatever. So I kind of, I found that quite, as much as I get energy from meeting people, which I love, I just found it quite a lot. So this year, like they taking a kind of a completely opposite approach, which is a bit crazy after 3 years to just throw your strategy out the window. But my sales are up, my profits up, and now I'm getting a couple of days off a week, and yeah, but it's hard. It is hard. I'm just very efficient at things. I do as much as the making takes time and I care about it. Everything else I try to automate and produce systems for. That was my career for basically 20 years was to
Yeah.
so a lot of that comes into play. Um, and where I do need help, I look for ways to get help. So whether it's helping maybe a bit of support with the making or some help with marketing, or I will try to find ways to to use some of the money I've got to the money that I would have been using to pay for the markets, because markets are expensive in the first place. They're not cheap.
Right.
You can pay a lot of money per day to be at a market. So I'm trying to think of that money differently and trying to say, well, if I'm not using it to do this, then why don't I try spending it on getting some support to do some PR or support to do some content or
Yeah.
something like that.
Are markets very different? I'm sort of thinking that one of the upsides of markets might be that you get to talk to people and talk about what you're making, but you might also be disappointed by their attitudes and response to what you're making. But if you could only go to the right sort of
Yeah,
markets where
for your customer. Yeah.
the sort of people who would be likely to like what you make. But I do see a lot of small makers do markets.
They're much easier to do in terms of you don't the social media thing is an art like a weird dark art. So I think
Yeah.
it's an easy way to just be in front of a lot of people. But you're right, you just don't know until you've done that market. You don't know what type of person's coming, and and then on top of that, you don't know what the weather's going to be like, and then you don't know whether they're going to turn up that day. And if you've not got any sort of following or brand already that you're attracting, you're telling people you're going to be there. It's just completely random. It's very good for market research, like actual market research. Like when I did my first one, it was in the West End Fair in Edinburgh, and it was 30 days. It was the first time I was feeling really rubbish about my business. It'd been I was my so we'd launched in the September, so this is like August, so it's like 11 months later, and we'd had a very quiet sort of first start of the year, and thinking, what the hell have I done with my life? But then turning up in turning up in person to to an event and then people come and spending £130 on a scarf who don't know you and just in love with what you've created, in love with your design, is just such a nice feeling. So that's a really special thing to have. And then you learn, what do people like, what do they not like, what do they. So it's a lot of benefit in doing it. I feel like after 2.5 years of doing it, I've learned enough to feel, and I've built enough of a kind of brand now in Edinburgh, at least, that I can draw people to me now. So when I did the tank tops, I launched them. I needed people to try them on because I needed them to fit people. The whole point of a piece of
Yeah.
clothing is it's going to fit, and they're gender neutral. And I have 8 sizes, and each size has 2 lengths. There's a lot of options you can have with Woolkind.
Yeah.
And I was like, I need people to try them on because what if they buy them and they don't fit? Especially being a man who is of my stature, I'm not used to different body shapes really when I'm making myself. So I did this call out on social media, and within 2 weeks, I had 40 people who I didn't know from all over Edinburgh turn up, try on the sizes, let me take photos of them. And now on my website, when you go to buy a tank top, you can look at a fit library and it's got literally, 30 odd people and how they look like in all the different sizes to help.
Wow.
Now, I don't think that would have happened 2 years ago, or maybe it would have done, but I wouldn't have had the skills on social media to get their attention in the first place to drive them in. So
Yeah.
I think it's just sort of trying to find a way to give them a reason to come and visit and say hello, rather than me turning up at the market and hoping for the best. So
Wandering around Edinburgh city centre with a pile of tank tops on your arm.
maybe I'm not against that.
But I'm just sort of thinking at these sort of market events. I mean, you have to catch someone's eye, make them stop,
hmm
be interested, get to tell your story, and all about the product. I mean, there's a lot that has to sort of come together there.
There is a lot, but the good thing about being in person is that people are much more quick to make a decision. So if someone sees something they fall in love with, they're much more likely to convince themselves they're going to buy it there and then. Whereas on Instagram or through your website, you've really got to convince someone because they're going to look at something they see and they're going to scroll on. They don't know the price. They're going to then look at the price. It's too expensive. I don't want that. There's actually a lot of steps someone has to take to make a purchase online. So it's a whole other kind of marketing strategy to go after and very different and something I'm learning a lot all the time because I'm not got any marketing background. Whereas in person, someone can just say, "Oh my god, I love that scarf. Okay, I'll buy it."
Yeah.
You know. So,
That's
but
weird
you do
because
have to make it look pretty, and you've got to. There's a whole art to merchandising, and
yeah,
that's a whole other thing. There's so many things to do. Yeah.
that's very strange because I often talk about the exact totally opposite of what you're saying here about how easy it is to buy stuff online. It's just, oh, look at that. Oh, that sounds nice. And you buy it. But if you actually go into a shop, I mean, you go in and you might see something, you might feel it, you might inspect it, you might try it on, and then you have to pull out your card. And there's so many steps and there's so many
Oh,
points
interesting.
where you might back out because I find it really difficult to buy stuff in shops. But online, I'm anybody's.
Really, you would see something on an Instagram feed and just go and buy it if you like the look of it.
I'm hesitant to say yes out loud here, but I'm nodding.
Okay, that's really interesting. Okay. Because it's quite yeah, because there's a lot of steps in a process of a website alone that could stop you. Like the returns
Uh,
policy, the delivery cost. The do you trust the
I mean,
website? Do you know that the
I,
brand
I
exists?
might look at the delivery cost when I actually get to the checkout,
Um,
but returns policy. I mean, I'm in Norway, so
yeah.
everything has to go through customs. So
Okay.
basically, non-returnable.
And do you what about if you've never heard of the brand before?
I mean, I ordered a pair of very expensive Harris tweed trousers from a brand, was it in China? And I did lie awake afterwards thinking, what the hell did I just do? And when they arrived, they actually did turn out to be unlined Harris tweed. So, which isn't necessarily the most comfortable.
No. You sound like a great customer. You
I'm
sound
a
like an
terrific
ideal
customer.
customer.
Yeah, but I am also super picky. That's why I can't buy anything in shops. But I mean, on websites, you get all the nice photos, you
Yeah.
get all the florid text. I mean, the romantic prose, blah blah blah, and you just totally get seduced.
Okay. Well,
Before you know, before you know it, you've spent money. It's terrible.
I'm the opposite. I I take a long time to make a decision.
Yeah. Well, that's. I mean, it's fascinating that we have such diametrically opposite views on that.
Mm.
But then again, I'm rarely selling anything, so you actually have the that view. I mean, you can probably through website
Maybe, yeah,
metrics see exactly how people behave.
maybe seeing it from the other angle does make you more cautious about what you're maybe as well. Yeah. Um, I'm always curious about how people have set up their because I've had to think about every aspect of this business. You know, when I
Mm.
see another business and I do look at their whether it's the product or their manufacturing or anything like that, I am questioning how have they done that. Oh, that doesn't seem right. That that comment looks like it's trying to convince me something that isn't true. I'm always there's a lot of lack of trust, I think, when it comes to my clothing shops, particularly. I have.
But fake websites are a bit of a thing now,
Yeah, yeah.
and I've seen quite a few recently. I mean, they obviously copy using some copy robot or something an entire website, and then put the prices. It's normally the prices are suspiciously low
Hmm.
to make you spend your money there, but otherwise totally plausible, and that's a problem.
I've seen, yeah, there's now AI can create a website in seconds, literally, and you can then have AI models. You can have it can all be AI, and you don't know what you're getting. Um, I've definitely found since putting more effort into my Instagram and social media that my trust is not an issue now. People know who I am, they trust me, and if they want to buy something, they will buy it. So
Yeah,
when they come to my website, but obviously there's people that come to my website who don't know me through social media, but yeah, no, it's very scary because in COVID, I remember in COVID, I bought a leather jacket. I saw this leather jacket. I think it was on Instagram, and I went and bought it, like you just did, and uh, and it said it was made in London and it was leather, and I was like, or made in yeah, and I was like, this is amazing. I think it was far too cheap at the time. It was too good to be true. I bought it and it arrived, and first of all, it was PVC. It wasn't leather, and then there was no mention of UK. It was made in Bangladesh or something. And I was like,
yeah,
I felt so tricked. I felt so angry about it. And obviously I returned it, but um, it made me very cautious about, and I've been burnt a few times now where and even when something, even like a few weeks ago actually, I was looking for t-shirts. So basic stuff I would buy, like a t-shirt, and I'm very, again, picky about where am I buying it from, where is it made, what's it made of. And I found this company in the UK making stuff out of organic cotton. Um, and I was like, amazing, these are great prices. I'm going to order it. So I even phoned them up because I was thinking about they do t-shirt printing as well, and I thought, okay, I could maybe introduce a set of Woolkind t-shirts into my range that they could print for me, and it's all made in the UK and it's all organic
yeah,
cotton. It feels good. It literally arrived, and it was made in India. And I was like, this doesn't make any sense. There's not mention of India anywhere on your website. The website was all about how ethical and sustainable everything was. And
yeah.
I sent it back. Um, and I was really, really angry at myself because I was like, I can't believe this happened. It's happened. Like I'm so picky about where I'm buying, and yet even I can still be duped into thinking something's made in the UK and it's not. And
It's
yeah,
weird you should mention that because last week's guest, Anthony Pinsey of Fashion Department
mm,
London, was talking about just that, how you can almost set up turnkey small businesses where you just pick what products you want to stock and there you go,
I can just
which sounds kind of like this.
I can do that right now on my website right now. I can go to an app for Shopify and basically stick drop shipping on my put some products, literally click a button, and then they become available to my customers to buy. It's
Yeah.
so easy. It's so easy. And I have no idea where they're coming from, but I'll take the money and
Yeah.
then yeah,
Most often China, I guess. So it could be,
yeah.
well, the price
I,
says it all, really.
I guess it depends. I guess at the end of the day, it depends on why someone who's built that kind of business. What like it all comes down to why. Why does someone build a business? Why do they? What are they trying to achieve? What are they doing? And I think for me, I've never been driven by money. Money's never been something that actually. I it really makes me ambitious to work. I don't, I've been lucky. I've had a good career, and I've been paid well, um, and I've been careful. But I've never been driven in that way. And I think if you when you follow a passion, or you're making something you're really proud of, I think, and that becomes the focus, then you create something beautiful. I think if you start to build a business purely on the fact that you're just trying to make money for the sake of making money, I think you lose all. Surely that's really sad. You must lose all purpose and all real. I don't
That's
know.
the sort of hustle economy, isn't it?
Yeah,
Because you're wanting the watches, you're wanting the cars, you're wanting
yeah,
the nightlife, and that's why you want to start a streetwear brand where you just print your t-shirts, and it's a whole different thing. And I think that is more fashion type of mindset.
yeah,
Really, it's not the creator making mindset.
yeah. It's interesting because I guess young people, especially these days, they just get shown such. There's a lot of glamour that's shown online, and glamorous lifestyles, like you say, the fancy watches and cars, and I just think it's a yeah. We kind of strive, encourages people to strive for those sorts of things. Actually, at the end of the day, they're not going to make you happy. Um,
Uh,
yeah, I guess maybe as
it's
you get older, you're a bit more aware of these things and try to
you realise you've missed that opportunity to
yeah
become an influencer and get superb wealth for very very little effort.
yeah.
Uh, that's as good as it got. So, yeah, yeah. I think it is a young person's thing. This fantasy whereby you can
Yeah,
achieve a lot without
without doing
really
yeah,
having to. Yeah.
but, but nothing comes that easy.
But then you buy a knitting machine and you decide to start a knitwear company
Mm.
and all that, and you're really sort of putting the effort into it.
Yeah.
I, I was going to mention there's this Norwegian company that's been going a few years now, which started because the guy's a sheep farmer, and he went to deliver the wool and discovered that he was being paid less for the wool he delivered than the diesel it cost him
Mm.
to actually get there, or the cost of sharing it,
Yeah.
which became an idea. And they ended up buying two Japanese 3D knitting
Oh, okay, like
machines.
a Shimasaki.
And through the Fibre Shed project in Norway and a lot of local craftspeople, they do the scouring at
Hmm.
a sort of micro scouring place.
Amazing.
So the sweaters they make are all natural undyed wool, but from different flocks. So it's all different shades of grey, I
Yeah.
guess,
And brown.
from
Yeah,
light
yeah,
grey
yeah,
to
yeah.
dark grey in between, and it's all tagged with exactly which farm it
I
comes
love that.
from. Oh, it's a fantastic
That's
idea, but
amazing.
like you, and of course, it's all done super locally.
Mm.
But I mean, they are just a tiny little two-person company. Uh, I mean, the 3D knitting machines pretty much
Yeah,
operate,
expensive. Yeah.
but they do knit in a way. I think make about 10, 15 sweaters a day.
Wow, that's good. And they don't have to because they're made in one piece. Then they don't have
They're made in one piece, so I mean, you have to keep an eye on them because occasionally they'll be missing an arm or something.
to.
But it just goes to show that I mean, things are possible. There are different ways of doing things,
Mm.
and their story is so compelling that I mean, they're way out in the middle of nowhere, but tourists will come by and buy a stack of sweaters, and they're not cheap. But it just goes to show that I mean, if there is a will there, things
Mm.
might happen.
Yeah, it's just
So
slowly getting your name out there, isn't it? Yeah.
I think it comes back to what I was saying about you only need to find as many customers as you
Mm.
have product for. And I think a lot of people start out thinking that we have to make something now that appeals to absolutely everyone.
Mm.
We have to maximize our market, or I'm not a marketing person, so I don't know what words they'd use, but this thing that you have to appeal to absolutely everyone. But really, if you can make 10 of something, then you need to find 10 people who can buy it.
Mm. Uh,
Preferably, you want them to pay
yeah,
what
and
you want them to pay.
it's interesting because yeah, I think that's you don't. I think being at the beginning, I think my brand was a wee bit vanilla, and that's really boring. Like at the end of the day, nobody wants to buy from a brand that's vanilla. They want to buy something that they feel connected to. Um, but interestingly, when I've never had a sale. was like a traditional sale since I started. I've had a sample sale, and I'm thinking of doing another one of them in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Um, but I've sometimes made random scarves and random colorways for the markets, and sometimes they sit on a rail for sometimes a year, even longer. But then that one person comes along and goes, "Oh my God, I love that scarf," and then they buy it, and I think I always used to say, "There's always a scarf. There's a scarf for everyone." Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's you just need that one person for that one item. And yes, the bigger you are, the more eyes see something. Um, but I think it's too easy to just discount things and get rid of them. But it really depends on your again on your business model, and if you've got big rents and you've got big staff costs and things like that, it's hard. You do need cash to keep going. Um,
Yeah.
but because I work on a different model where my stock is very low anyway, then having a few extra pieces, I'd rather just sell at full price and wait for the right person to come along. So,
Yeah. I think the danger of doing sales all the time is that the sales price kind of ends up in people's mind as the price you're selling for.
mhm.
And there is a major British maker of duffel coats who every spring 70% discount on all their duffel coats. 2 months later, they've restocked kind of the exact same duffel
Mm.
coats. And it's like, I mean,
No.
anyone interested in one knows that it was just wait until spring.
Mm. I, I think that, and again, it depends on their model because it could be that they're doing a lot of wholesale and in the other parts of the world that they're going out and then they just do the sale. But I think it's a bad habit to be in, and I'm always trying to uphold my pricing and kind of really stay strong. And it's very easy to feel like you need to give someone a discount or give someone a you know yeah some sort of offer. You're told, especially as an e-commerce business, it's all about the offer.
Yeah.
and and sometimes I'm always trying to think of creative ways to encourage people to make a decision, but at the same time trying to protect the value of my product. Um, yeah, I did a very interesting thing at Black Friday last year, which I think was slightly ingenious, but also um, was a difficult kind of internal conversation. So um,
Okay.
I was
I'm
encouraged.
intrigued.
I was encouraged to do Black Friday, but I was doing this kind of course on how to sell fashion online. It was a kind of 6 month thing I was doing, which was very helpful and I've learned a lot from. But we had this long conversation about Black Friday and how Black Friday should be your best sales weekend of the year. And me and another slow fashion brand who was also made to order, we were like having a set. We were like, I don't want to do it. I hate everything about Black Friday. It just goes against everything
Yeah.
I believe in. Um, but I came up with this idea where, because if you think about what my business is, it's like this is a knitwear business, so it's very, very winter focused and made to order. So what happens is my capacity in winter gets very, very tight. My orders go up, my machine's on all the time, and I am really, really busy from basically October to March time. But it's really, really tight in October to December. And because I don't make lots of stock in advance, it's even worse. It just exacerbates. So the idea of doing an actual sale in the middle of my best season, when everything's made
Yeah.
to order, doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any business sense whatsoever. So,
Yeah.
but then I thought, wait a minute, but there are other times of the year when my capacity is easier. So let's say February time, when my sales are lower because people are through the winter season and they're. Um, so I had this idea which I called IO Wool, as in IOU. And I put it to my customers on Instagram and said, what do we all think of this? So the idea was that they would get 20% off the price of a made to order garment, but they wouldn't receive the garment until 5 months later.
Okay. Yeah.
So they were basically buying production capacity for me in advance. So I would fill up my order book for February basically, and they would get an incentive to wait because they love it and they want to wait.
Yeah.
And it would only be those products, nothing in stock, nothing available. And it was a really interesting conversation because I actually had a lot of people saying, you don't need to touch your prices, you don't need to do a sale. And then other people going, actually, that's a really, really good idea because what I don't want when my machine isn't on, it's I'm losing money in theory. So yeah, it was quite an interesting idea and it worked quite well. And I think I might do it again this year. Um, I guess what would normally happen is you'd make loads of stock and then you'd come to your quiet season and just go on sale. But I kind of got it on sale before it went on sale, but it was only 20%. It wasn't a massive discount. But for me, it was, it was something that you couldn't get any other time of the year or any other time. So yeah, it was kind
And
of
they've actually paid up front then and
paid up
waited
front
5 months.
and they had to wait. So it's not like you're sitting getting something and getting the dopamine. Now you have to, trust me and
I mean, that type of pre-order idea with a discount isn't unheard of,
hmm,
but you do have to make your customers believe in you.
hmm. Because everything I do is made to order. So in theory, you should say that it should all be cheaper than buying stock. But my model, because my whole model's made to order, then actually it doesn't work like that. It's all built into the pricing anyway. So yeah,
I guess you could sort of do the opposite as well, that introduce a fast track whereby you pay 20% more, but you get it a week earlier.
that is an interesting idea, and I like that's quite a good idea actually. I quite
Yeah,
yeah
there you
for all the
go.
impatient people. Yeah,
So you want it made to order, but you want it like
tomorrow. Yeah,
tomorrow.
yeah. It's interesting. I did think on my email list. So I've got an email subscription. You sign up to an email list, and at the moment it's got you can get a 10% discount at the beginning of your first order. But I hated that from day one, and I've just not had the time to really think about how that should work going forward. And one of the things I did have was that you could have priority queue. So if you're on the mailing list, you automatically get bumped ahead of everyone else if you make an order, or
That can quickly get a bit sticky.
yeah, so it's just trying to work out how it would work. So I've been playing with some ideas for that to make it more of a kind of club.
You'll get people registering 3 or 4 email addresses, so they have 3 or 4 newsletters and sort of get super VIP status.
Yeah, well, if they're buying lots, I don't mind.
Ah, it's all manipulating the customers, right? So, I mean, you're doing mostly online now. I mean, do people from all over the world order, or is it mainly localish?
Interestingly, I did a scarf in a limited edition scarf in February, which sold out in a few hours. And apart from one, they all went to people in Edinburgh, and it was all through online. But I sell to the UK. I do get sales over around the UK, and I only sell to a few countries other than that. So, United States, Canada, places like Norway, Switzerland, um, some other kind of random countries. Um,
Right.
but at the moment, I've not worked out. Well, I haven't really worked out or put into place the EU. So the EU is actually very complicated to sell to now,
Yeah.
as being since Brexit. So as a small business, it's actually very costly. So it's something I keep thinking about and thinking I need to sort. But then every time I go to do it, some new rule comes available. There's a new legislation, and I just can't keep up. So at the moment, I'm sticking to what I'm doing. But
Yeah. I remember talking to Ruth Emily Davies of Red Shoes in Wales, and she'd get sort of groups of women from America coming over and coming to this. I think it was quite a small place in Wales,
mm,
but they'd sort of turn up 2 or 3 of them to be fitted for their shoes. And I'm thinking, wow. I mean,
that's
if
it.
you can get like that on the sort of destination trail type of thing, that's a good
That is
idea.
my goal. Like so, in December, I was doing a market in December, and I had a reel on Instagram go viral, and people were turning up from America at my market stall saying, "I saw you on Instagram. I saw your video. I loved what you said, and I wanted to come and see your scarves." So that was really interesting. I was like, "Wow, this
Wow.
does work." Uh, and I have people like I had an email yesterday from someone saying, "I'm coming up from London at the weekend. I want to try a tank top on. Can I come and so I think the bigger you get, the more that'll happen, and yeah, that's the goal. Because in reality, just that would be the people just coming and booking appointments, and then but you just need to. It's just getting your again brand awareness and getting enough people to know you exist for that to find all those people.
Mm.
Fashion's a funny thing because they say that if a lot of marketing is like you find the person, your ideal customer, and then they'll know other people around in their circle that are also the ideal customer. But I don't know if it works like that in fashion. Just because someone loves bright colors or loves really sustainable products or whatever doesn't mean their best friend is the same. I don't know if it's the I don't know. I don't know. A lot of people they've got that one friend who loves the bright, crazy colored, clothing.
Yeah.
They're not all going out to the shops looking like you know,
I think the answer is probably yes and no.
yeah.
I mean, I don't really know many people in my circle who are into clothes in the same way that I am. But on social media, I do have a lot of
Mm.
people I'm connected to, and I see that being used by marketing companies who want to sell stuff by gifting
It's-
items of clothing to people in these circles
mm.
because all of a sudden 12 guys will have the same blue jacket. And I think that's kind of working against what you wanted to achieve because now it's obvious that you've given away all these jackets. And at least to me, that makes them very much less interesting.
Mm. Yeah, that's an interesting topic. Influencers is an interesting topic, and that kind of culture, um, and gifting. Yeah, it's interesting. Oh, yeah.
I That's something I said a lot about on my second to last
Yes.
podcast, and I was thinking I'd get a lot of feedback on that, probably be told off in quite strict terms by certain people. Crickets, not a word of
Well,
anything.
maybe you need to take some more excerpts of it and post them on Instagram. You'll get some.
That might get more attention
Yeah.
than I can handle. I'm really a very shy and introvert person who doesn't thrive on too much attention. There you go. So, where do you see yourself in a few years?
Oh. I don't know. I'd like I'd like to be at the point where I've got like is a slightly better machine. I've got maybe a couple of people helping me, working with me, um, and the brand is a bit more well known across at least across the UK. Uh, I think at the moment I don't want to push myself to be huge. I don't have that desire. I'd rather have that model where people are coming to this destination because they want a piece of Woolkind, and that's an
Mm.
exciting thing rather than pushing myself to end up opening, I don't know, being all over the place. I don't want to be all over the place. I don't want Woolkind appearing in every shop in the world. That's not what, it doesn't feel right. Um, yeah, I think I'm quite happy with my trajectory at the moment of my slow.
I'm utterly charmed by your incredibly humble ambitions. It's rare to hear such low key ideas. I mean, obviously you're going to succeed in that.
There's another, at the back of my head, there's another version of it, which is I have this brand that opens up a shop in the middle of Covent Garden, and it's got a machine in the shop, and you come and you pick your colors, and it's made in 2 days, whatever. That is the version that is the ambitious version,
The,
and it's appear
the real one.
you're in Fifth Avenue, well, no, maybe not Fifth Avenue, but you're in all the cool cities in the world. But I think step by step, I think, and it's interesting when I was talking to another entrepreneur on Thursday about this kind of thing, and that version of the world is actually a very stressful version. Um, it's a very yeah, a very kind of high intense business to
Yeah.
run with a lot of staff and a lot of costs and a lot of risk. And traditionally, I'm not a very risk averse person. So actually, I think I'll favor content. I think I will always err towards balance where I can and a contented life than growth for the sake of growth. Because I think yeah, like I say, it's not the money that would be driving me. It would be something else, and I don't know what that would be. Maybe, yeah. I'm still quite young, so there's a lot to go. So I don't know. I don't know where it'll go.
But the idea of having almost instant gratification in a shop like that, I mean, the technology is kind of
It's yeah,
available now.
yeah,
It's just how smoothly could you set up an order and then have a 3D knitting machine
yeah.
come back in a couple of hours, and that would be pretty cool.
It would be cool, and I like the 3D knitting machines. But again, it kind of, you're pushing it too hard towards the
Yeah.
machines. I actually bought a jumper about a month ago from an outlet store in the borders of Scotland, where there's lots of amazing knitwear manufacturing, and I bought it because it was made in one piece. It was a whole garment jumper, and I've not bought a jumper for probably 20 years. I make all my own jumpers, but it was in the outlet, and it was really interesting just looking at it from a purely construction perspective, how it's been created. I
Yeah.
don't know. The idea of like just pressing a button and the machine just produced knitwear and I just like hands it to, I think I would lose all my love for it. I don't want to just press a button.
mean, you could do what is the basis of a lot of UK manufacturing, sew in the label.
You could sew in the label, but yeah, no, putting on a neck trim is actually so much fun for me. Like, there's just so
Yeah,
much precision and detail that goes into getting it right, and I, oh, just the satisfaction wouldn't be there without it.
yeah. Now, something I'm going to ask you about. I've asked quite a few people involved in knitting about it because I see so much knitwear being marketed as hand knit,
Mm.
where you can sort of tell that they're implying that it's knit using pins
Mm-hmm.
in the olden way,
Yeah.
but it's obviously knit using a hand operated knitting machine.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why aren't there two different expressions for this?
I would say there are two different expressions. So for me, hand knit means, like you say, with knitting needles and you're
Yeah,
knitting. I would call the other approach, and what I would even call my knitting, handmade. So not hand knit, but handmade. So
gosh, they're still too close.
are they too close for you?
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
oh, to me, there's a very clear distinction. But yeah, maybe if you're not a
Yeah.
knitter, maybe it doesn't mean anything different. Um, I don't know. I think to say something is hand knit that isn't literally been knit from the ground up by your hands is not hand knit
Yeah.
in my eyes. That's not hand knit.
I think it's, I mean, it's often very, very unclear. I even saw community clothing
Oh, don't.
making some sweaters now, and it was strongly implied that they
You mean
were
do you mean their new?
handmade.
You mean the Ganzis that they were making?
I think that might do about £400 a piece.
This is a very interesting conversation. Um, they were hand knit. They were knit by women in the UK.
Really?
From my understanding from the email I received from them, an email that I actually did reply to them and asking them a few questions because I was a bit curious about how long it was taking them to make them and the pricing that was associated with the piece. And a
Yeah.
lot of discussion has been had in my knitting group about this. Um, so far, I've not received a reply from Community Clothing, but this is it's a contentious subject. I don't know.
Yeah.
Uh,
Because I can't make the math
it
work.
doesn't work. I don't think it works. Um, I, yeah, a jumper like that would take at least probably 30 hours of work, if not maybe 50.
Yeah.
Um,
I think about 50.
yeah,
Yeah.
it,
Then you have to take the £400 and take off the VAT, and
and the
then
profit
there's
margin and the yeah.
50 to £75 of wool, and then 50 hours work. I mean, it's
This is
suddenly,
this is exactly the conversation I was having, and interesting. And like I said, I emailed them because I love Community Clothing. I buy a lot from them, and I'm just really curious about how this is working. So, um, hopefully, I'll get a reply at some point. They've not gone on sale yet, so maybe once they go on sale officially, I might ask them
yeah,
again. But yeah, it's interesting because some people in my knitting group, when we've discussed this, have said, well, the women are happy to get paid, and they must be happy to take whatever it is. So maybe it's like £100 or £150 for the jumper. But my view is that if you're an ethical, sustainable fashion brand, it's your responsibility to pay the people that are making your products the right living wage for the work that they're doing. And to pay piecemeal is complicated with that. So, yeah, I don't know how the maths works for that. And that's why I didn't, when someone said to me, will you knit me a jumper? I would say absolutely not, because to spend 40 hours to make something for someone else, even as a gift, or even if they paid me, I just don't think they would ever appreciate the amount of time that went into it. So I just don't do it.
no. I mean, I have a my wife has a mother-in-law who's a total. I was about to say knit head, but that's such a silly expression. But she's always knitting,
Yes.
so she'll churn out a sweater a week about it. But
Wow.
I mean, she always needs new things to knit, so she's a fairly easy ask in that respect.
Mm.
But for someone who actually struggles to knit a sweater
Mm.
is a
Well,
totally different thing.
I only knit. I only hand knit for myself. I've never made anything for anyone else. Um, Again, because I don't think people really appreciate. I don't think you can really ever really appreciate the amount of work that goes into a jumper. But maybe you do think. Maybe you do appreciate it. But it's a lot of
I
work.
don't know. I mean, I find it hard to appreciate things. I mean, I've been sewing some clothes for myself, but I can't appreciate them, so I've stopped
I
doing
know.
that.
It's funny though, because I was with the whole community clothing thing. I was saying that to someone the other day that to me a hand knit jumper, so literally where it's been knit by hand, is the height of luxury. To have someone make a piece of clothing from scratch with no machine is surely the utmost in luxury, and it should be
Yeah.
expensive. It should be, not cost a lot of money. It should do because you've got a lot of effort that gone into it. So I think, yeah, I think it's again, it comes back to the whole concept of the value of clothing and the value of people's time to make, and how it's devalued by the world that we live in, and that it's not really understood or appreciated by the majority of people. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's an extreme version of something that I
And if the person who's knitting it for you leaves a few strands of their hair in it, then you will love them forever.
possibly, was that a thing? Okay, right.
It was a thing over here, at least. I don't know if it works, but it's a nice thought.
I don't know. I don't know if my customers would appreciate that. I sometimes do find when I'm steaming, so at the end of my process and before I put a label
Yeah.
on, I sometimes do find bits of grass in my yarn. So they've come all the way from the farm. That's always
I
fun.
often find that in Harris tweed.
Yeah, you will do.
It's a bracken, and I'm always very surprised that it's managed to make its way all the way through the scouring and all the other
Yeah,
processes, and you pick out this little bit of branch or
yeah.
whatever.
But there's something quite humbling about it. It kind of is a nice reminder that it's come from the ground, and yeah, I like that.
Yeah, it reminds me when I was visiting Harris Tweed, and I always thought because of all the natural colours they talk about and how it's all the colours replicate nature, I was thinking that they probably use natural dyes and so forth.
I doubt it. Yeah,
No, they don't.
no.
But it's all. But if you look with a magnifying glass, I mean, that's one of the magical things about buying something in Harris Tweed is that over time you'll realise more and more what colours have gone into it,
Mm.
and it's mostly primary colours. But if you take a magnifying glass and have a look, it's quite a bewildering array of colours in the mix there, which is a little gift that keeps giving,
Yeah.
I guess. Now, is there anything we should have talked about that we haven't?
Eh, Not that I can think of. I think we've covered quite a lot. Have I forgotten something? Is that a
I
trick?
don't
Is that a
know.
trick question?
No, totally not a trick question. It's me grasping at straws, thinking that we might keep going a few more minutes.
Oh, sorry.
I mean, what other small sustainable brands do you rate? Who would you like to give a mention to?
Oh, um, I do like I say, I do buy from community clothing. I like their stuff. There's a lot of in Scotland actually. There's a lot of quite a few made to order businesses that are and down in England that I've kind of grown to know over the time. A lot of women's wear tends to be. Um, so in Glasgow, there's a company called Law Design. And it's
She's
all
been on the pod.
Oh, is she? All
Yes.
right. Yeah, so that's good.
Yeah.
All all made to order in Glasgow. And my friend Penelope runs a brand down in London called Momahilo. Very high fashion, but absolutely beautiful. Um, but she only uses black. So all of our all of our products are black, and we have a laugh because we always think we should troll each other on Instagram because we're the completely opposite. But everything's made to order, beautiful. Um, where else? I think shoes are interesting. So I struggle to
Yeah.
find shoes and underwear. They're the hardest thing I think to find as a when you're trying to reduce your plastic intake. After doing lots and lots of research, I ended up buying from Veja. I've got two pairs of Veja shoes. You know them? They're a French brand.
Yeah, they make
Yeah.
trainers.
Um,
Yeah.
and again, that was a lot of research to try and find a pair of trainers that didn't have recycled polyester in them. Um,
Oh,
where else did I buy from? I don't know. I've kind of am I forgetting. Not big brands. I don't really. I tend to find more small kind of niche things nowadays and buy something I love. I've got a friend in Edinburgh called who runs a business called Second Stories, and she takes old things and turns them into new. And she's got quite a big following on Instagram now. I got a yellow wool coat last year that was made from an old yellow wool blanket, and it's just beautiful. So I like to invest in those kind of like one-off pieces now that are like a staple, and I wear them all the time, but they're really special, and you feel good wearing
Yeah.
them.
I mean, I have noticed over time that my tastes and things I want are increasingly esoteric and niche and weird. Uh,
It's hard.
so I can relate to that, not wanting anything that is sort of in common use or
Yeah, you want something that's yours. Yeah.
want something kind of different. So, I mean, like you sewing jeans from Japanese denim, because I mean that arguably is the loveliest denim.
Hmm. It's beautiful. It is beautiful. I'm scared to cut it. It was probably more expensive. The actual denim was probably more expensive than most people spend on a pair of jeans. So yeah, but it's worth it. It
I've
will be
got
worth it.
I've got piles of Harris Tweed downstairs,
Oh yeah. Oh.
which I have an intention of making something out of, but I can't make myself cut into it at all.
Are there
Um,
any are there any like tailors near you that you can ask to make things for you? No.
nothing
Oh,
at all.
I am.
Yeah, all you have these days are places that offer made-to-measure suits, and I think they all use the same
Hmm,
factory in Latvia or somewhere, which is I mean, apparently super professional place.
hmm.
But basically, you've got all these people just taking orders and sending them in to the same mega factory.
Okay. I did in Edinburgh we've got quite a few retailers, which is quite useful. I actually bought myself randomly. I was in a zero waste hub down in Leeds last year. I think it was last year, and I bought randomly a hide of leather. So it was a whole hide of leather that was
As you would, yeah.
25 it was 25 pounds, and I felt like it was worth it. It was huge. I was like, what a waste to not buy this leather. Why would I not buy this? So I bought this leather thinking I was going to make myself a leather jacket, which I have not had a single minute to try. Although I did draft a pattern for, which I forgot about till recently. But now I'm at the point, right, where I said, actually, I just need to find someone who can make one for me, and I'll give them the leather and pay them a good pay, and then I'll get this beautiful piece. So I'm on the hunt for a leather, but a leather tailor. I don't know what they're called.
Well, there are two reputable leather jacket makers in Scotland, and there's another one in England somewhere, Field Leathers, but you have Aero Leathers.
Yeah, their stuff is that the one in the borders.
I think it probably is.
It's
And
more.
then you've
I
got
did look at them. It looked a bit more kind
Simmons
of.
Built, so there's another one, I think.
It looked a bit more like a kind of pilot type, kind of aviator
I
type.
think they make everything from motorcycle jackets to pilot,
Okay, I need to look at them again then.
coastal command
Yeah.
type things.
Okay. I was in a really cool shop in Edinburgh the other day because of this, because it's on St Mary's Street, and they sell leather bags and leather belts that they make in house. So I went in there to ask them if they knew anyone that could help me with my leather jacket. Um, and so I need to go back in there and meet one of their members of staff who supposedly might be able to help. So.
Right. There you go. That sounds like a cool project, though. I've never had a hankering for a leather jacket.
Oh really? Oh no, I think there's something quite cool about a leather jacket.
It's one of those things that just seems so wrong. Same Chelsea boots on men, skinny jeans. There's any number of things that it's just, oh,
Oh
no,
no.
no, will not happen. There we go. Okay, Laurence. Anything you'd like to mention just in closing? Your upcoming sale, which is never going to happen.
So if you're interested to learn more about what I'm doing in terms of my sustainable approach to wool and sourcing and how I take a piece of fiber and turn it into a garment, I am doing a talk every day through August at the Edinburgh Fringe, from
Uh-huh.
10:30. You can buy tickets on edfringe.com.
Streamed?
And sorry,
Will it be live streamed?
that wasn't the plan, no, but maybe I need to
Oh,
record it. Yeah, so that's quite exciting. So that's my alternative to doing the markets, is to have people come to my studio and learn about everything I do. Yeah, so that'll be fun.
that's clever. Lure them in and
Yeah.
ply them with your goods. Well, there we go. Okay, Laurence. coming up to 2 hours, so I think we've had a good old run now.
Lovely, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me today. It was a pleasure to have you here and learn about your colourful knitwear.
Thank you, Nick. It was very lovely to talk to you, and I appreciate the chat. Very good.
Okay, and I'll leave the contact details in the show notes, etc., etc.
Thank
And
you.
bye bye for now.
See you later.